Hey, Professor Raby, this is Jacob Watson. I am doing an oral presentation for my leadership interview for the Student Choice Project. The person I decided to do my leadership interview on is Jennifer Stewart. She is a married mother of four, an MBA student at East Tennessee State University, as well as the Patient Flow Support Manager at the Johnson City Medical Center, which means she is over the patient transport department, the nurse float pool, the PBX switchboard, as well as she's an assistant manager with patient throughput, which is what she described to me as the system that oversees patients from the time they are admitted to the hospital to the time they are discharged from the hospital. The reason I picked Jennifer Stewart is, for one, she's my boss. I thought about doing my pastor, but my father is my pastor, so I decided that probably wouldn't fly. And two, she came into patient transport, which is notoriously an awful department to manage. Since I've been there in 2009, there have been 4 different managers there, so I feel like that is a high managerial turnover rate. And she's come in, she's really changed the culture within the department and outside of the department, like how they view the department and how other employees within the hospital treat the patient transport department. So I decided to interview her to see how she does what she does and what type of leadership philosophy she has that makes her so effective in the role she is in. So one of the things you asked us to do was to describe the person we interviewed, describe their workspace. And Jennifer's workspace is very indicative of a manager that is out of the office very often. With the position that she has, Jennifer has to be outside of the office, roaming around the hospital, going to the different departments that are under her control. So she doesn't spend a lot of time in her office, and it really reflects that. The walls are bare except for a couple of very obviously furnished pictures. There are a couple folders on the desk, a pinup board that was actually in the floor, and the furniture. I mean, it was just very generic, very unused, and it was very obviously so that way. The main thing that we talked about with in regards to leadership, I asked a lot of questions about what she thought of herself as a leader, how she saw herself, what type of leader she was, and the main thing we ended up talking about was relationships. And she was telling me one of the first questions I asked her was what was her philosophy on leadership. And what she said is so leadership, not necessarily her management, but leadership to her is somebody who will lead other people to achieve a goal, and while they are achieving that goal, they are helping to develop that person to reach their full potential. And I really like that because I didn't think about leadership that way as I mean, it's pretty obvious when you think about it, but I never thought of it as a mentorship type thing. I always thought of it as I lead, you follow type deal. And the way she incorporated relationships with other people was very I guess eye opening to that aspect of leadership. She also said that when she thinks of leadership, she thinks of transparency and accountability. So even right there, she's leading into the fact that she thinks relationships are important because if you didn't believe in transparency, I guess you really wouldn't believe in relationships because you wouldn't care about letting the other people know what was going on. So I went on to ask her about her personal leadership styles. So she told me that she considered herself more of a democratic leader. But that to be an effective leader, there has to be a percentage of each democratic and authoritarian. So democratically, she was more focused on relationships. So we really talked about relationships a lot. She was more focused on relationships and developing those. But when she was talking about being a democratic leader, she was talking about being like democratically open and available with all of her subordinates. But when push comes to shove, she has to be the one in the authoritarian role to make sure things get done the way she desires them to get done. Um, and then obviously when I asked her about being a task or relationship oriented leader, she told me that personally she is a task oriented person, but her leadership style is definitely more a relationship. We talked about this at length for probably 15 to 20 minutes, and the main gist of what we were talking about is that for for a person to be a good leader, she believes that from the get go, um, to have effective subordinates, they must have a relationship with their leader in order for them to work for them effectively. Um, so she said that the first thing she likes to do is establish a relationship with her subordinates so that they will be more willing to work for her harder and more efficiently because of that relationship. Um, let's see. I went on to ask her about if her supervisor was relationship oriented, and she said yes. But he's very driven and task oriented as well. But like her, he believes that relationships are the primary building block for which leaders can effectively lead their subordinates. Um, let's see. I went on to ask her about different traits of leadership, or different aspects of leadership. I listed her off four different aspects that we talked about, and the four were managing people, administrative skills, managing resources, and conceptual thinking. And instead of picking which one she thought was the most important, she decided to rank them in order. So obviously, from her, the first one that she thought was the most important was managing people, and then conceptual thinking. So to really lead well, you have to be innovative. If things come to a standstill, or something gets stale, or there needs to be a change, you have to be able to come up with that change. So she went managing people, conceptual thinking, managing resources, and then administrative skills. So she said that you could teach a monkey how to put things into a computer, but to manage people, resources, and to come up with ideas, you have to have somebody that is capable. Um, and I asked her what if she was hiring a manager, what would she look for, and she said that she would look for confidence, flexibility, a high set of personal standards, as well as a high set of standards for other people, which I think is a really good thing because it brings out the best in people. She cited availability and a sense of humor. Um, and then she went on to talk about how her managers need to have a very people-oriented personality, and that she wished they would focus on relationships. So apparently, Jennifer Stewart, relationships are the most important aspect of leadership. Then I went on to ask her about some things about like being a leader and how that affects her. Um, and I asked her what the hardest part about leading transport was, because it is such a notoriously terrible department to manage. And she said that her least, or her hardest thing to deal with, was negativity within the department, and she said that it was poison. And I mean, I agree with that. When you have one person that can bring down the whole department, and the rotten apples analogy, if you put one rotten apple in a bushel of good apples, what are you going to get? You're going to get a bushel of bad apples. So she also cited that outside ignorance of the department is really hard to deal with, which I can understand that as well. Um, Um, Now I went on to talk to her about the whether um, leadership skills are innate or developed, and we talked about this at length, and how we believe um, that that leadership is, there are some aspects of leadership, some traits of a leader that they have to be born with. And I agree with that. I agree with that. One of the things she talked about was how her manager, Jason, has the ability to walk into a room and just take over the room, take over the situation. And I don't think that that is a learned skill. I think that is just you have it or you don't. But then we went on to talk about that you must be born with those traits, but then those traits aren't enough. So it's a combination of both. There are things you have to be born with to be able to lead, and but you also have to learn some things along the way to be an effective leader. Um, and I went on to ask her, since we talked about that leadership skills can be developed, I went on to ask her how she would do that, how she would develop leadership skills. And the main thing she talked about was getting people involved and exposing them to situations and exposing them to information, and letting them learn and giving them responsibility, and not exactly forcing them into it, but showing them that it's not that bad, and that they are capable. So we talked about a couple of guys that are actually in our department, and she was talking about how she tries to push them in directions responsibility directions, to give themselves to take on a little more than the other people in the department. And so I really agree with her on that. To develop leadership, you have to be exposed to situations where you have to lead. So, and then I went on to ask her about how being a parent has affected her leadership style, and she told me that the main thing she learned from being a parent that affects her leadership style is that people are capable of anything, negatively and positively. And that you just have to learn to accept that. You have to learn to accept that people are human and that they will fail. And through failure, that's one of the best ways to learn. So, yeah. And finally, one of the last questions I asked her was how leading patient transport, being the manager of patient transport, what leadership skills has that position helped her to develop. And she told me that in her position there, that she had to learn how to be more direct with people and not beat around the bush, as well as she had to learn how to establish firm boundaries, and how to really be clear with people and make sure they know exactly what you're talking about. So what I got from it, and one of the main things I got was that relationships are the primary device that you need to be an effective leader. And it was really informative, and I really enjoyed doing it. But it was a great experience. So she really taught me a lot. So that's all I got, and I appreciate you listening to me. Thank you so much. All right.